As gardeners in a temperate zone, we have a tendency to only focus in the spring growing season. We put all our efforts into getting seedlings growing and transplanting around March, April, June, depending on where you live. But then we tend to forget or neglect the fall garden, mostly because after a very hot and humid July or August, we really don't want to think about going out in the garden. I myself must confess that a fall garden has not been one of my priorities, my top priorities, but it's something I want to change. I want to be able to grow for a longer period of time more of my food, and that starts with sowing right after the peak of summer, which is in Maryland here, the last week of August, starting of October. And I think there will be enough time for some short season crops like lettuces and radishes to grow into maturity for this period of time. Since I don't have too much experience starting things around fall, I might prepare myself for some failure. That's because there isn't as much light in fall. Light diminishes, so plants don't grow at the same vigor as in the beginning of the year. So I have my doubts if I'll be able to get large produce from sowing at this time. But sowing before this would be impractical because of the high summer temperatures, 90s, almost 100 even. That would just fry the little seedlings. I'll put some faith in it and drop the seed, and hopefully I'll have something to show.
I think getting the right timing for sowing plants in fall is especially difficult in our Maryland climate that tends to go from very hot to having potential frosts in about 1 to 2 months. I suppose it's easier to get right in places with milder winters like the South, where fall may actually be the easiest time to grow some cool-loving plants. Nonetheless, I decided to grow radishes and lettuces since they can take light frosts in case winter came early.
One of the main reasons why I at times fail to grow a fall garden is for lack of space. At least that was the case in my last garden. But this time I have more space, obviously. But I also have this bed here with the lettuce that's going to seed already. It's bolting. And I'll make sure to clear it. At this point, it doesn't do me any good to have it. It's not going to produce anything good anymore. It's already bitter and tough. So I'll clear that up and then I'll sow these seeds. I have already sown 3 rows of these vegetables. I have a lettuce row, a icicle radish row, and the French breakfast row. They were sown last week, so they already emerged, and I'm glad they did. I will have to water it most likely because the soil is not as wet as in spring, but I will continue putting mulch, and that should take care of it. I'm glad that I put mulch, and it's been able to hold down the moisture for the soil, and it's also suppressed the weeds, so I don't have many weeds to deal with. But I have to continue putting it because it's already starting to get all decomposed, and that allows light to reach the surface of the ground, and that means weed seeds emerging. So I'll do that later when I cut the grass. But for now, it's about clearing the lettuce and planting the seed again.
Getting a continuous supply of vegetables growing is essential if you want to depend more on your garden as a secure food supply. That means sometimes being ruthless in removing plants that have passed their prime and don't offer future harvests, like these lettuce plants. As someone who loves plants and resists destroying them at their peak after months of rearing them, as they are about to flower and set seed, I have to force myself to think of the overall production. Getting the timing right for succession is paramount. Understanding how fast plants grow in your microclimate is essential to get the timing right. If you depend entirely on seed packets to inform you of how long your plants will take to start yielding, it can be sometimes frustrating. When you read that a plant will produce in 30 or 60 days, that is calculated from an ideal spot with great solar exposure. Urban and suburban gardeners having to make do in less than ideal spots with partial shade will experience slightly longer waiting periods, as the plant needs extra days to compensate for the lack of direct sun. This can mean a plant may take 2 to 3 weeks longer to produce if your conditions are not perfect, and that will severely impact your ability to grow a fall garden, as the period when it is too hot to start seedlings and the first frost may just be shorter than the actual number of days your plant will take to reach maturity. Throw into this equation the fact that light diminishes as winter approaches, and the problem compounds itself. But all is not lost. Some cool weather crops need diminishing daylight as a signal to create bulbs instead of flowers, like radishes. So it is an advantage to grow radishes or even cabbage in the fall as opposed to spring, when they're more likely to bolt. I'll be back right after this commercial.
It seems that gardening here in this new place is easier, also because of the climate. I am living in a river valley in the same way that I was living in the river valley before. However, this is a mountainous river valley. There are some mountain ranges around me, and that means that the climate is a little bit cooler, which means that I happen to have less mosquitoes, but also because the river here, it's very fast flowing, and that must mean that it's not swampy like in the last place, and which possibly means less mosquitoes. And mosquitoes were one of the big issues why I didn't plant a fall garden. They just were pesky little things that took away all my willingness to continue gardening into the months of August and September. So sometimes the reason why your garden might not look like your ideal may not be because of you necessarily. It could be the environmental setting that you are in. I am in a place that has more sun exposure, that has a better climate, and I think the soil, my less soil is pretty good. So the soil is good also, and my garden has been able to grow vibrant in the first year. I can only imagine how it's going to grow later on. And that makes me think, it's a shame. I think everybody in the face of the earth should be able to have a place where they could grow. It should be a human right to have access to good soil, and it would be good if people took good care of soil and good care of the land that's around them. We have land, and if we are smart and careful and we try to learn more about the environment and how it works and try to mimic it within our surroundings, we could arrive at a more prosperous world, a more just world, where people don't have to go hungry, where people are healthier because they're eating healthier food. I know that that's a very almost far-fetched idea considering the realities of our world. But my job is to inspire and to perhaps make people understand values that society at large don't instill in them. Value for stewardship of the land, to being able to eke out your food from the land in a respectful way. If more people do this, I am sure that land is going to be better used. It's not going to just be lawn. It's not going to just be overpasses and a lot of wasted land, really, in prime places. We need to start using our resources to the best of our abilities, and that's a huge task. And if we're able to do that slowly, perhaps that catches on, and soon enough we'll have what we dreamed of.
One thing I have noticed is that plants have grown more abundantly in this new garden, so a fall harvest seemed more possible than before.